my time this week to come over and do this for the industry. These guys are here on behalf of Hendrick Motorsports and the Hendrick Engine Shop, providing that support all week as well. This is a Chevrolet R07 Nascar engine. Compacted graphite block, if you're interested, and then of course aluminum cylinder heads, forged steel crankshafts. Crankshafts for these engines run between $10,000 and $12,000 a piece, so it's pretty high-priced equipment. We're running on this engine here Carrillo rods. Our good friends at Carrillo supply all our con rods for these engines that we do the demos on, and they have been wonderful for us and good for us. Our good friends at Autobeater supply all the gauges that you see back there. And I know they're here at the show, so we really appreciate what they do. The engine stand, which is really nice, as you can see here, it's got a self-contained battery and a fuel tank and the whole shebang. That was fabricated at the Hendrick Fab Shop. They're pretty much able to do anything they want at Hendrick Motorsports. They have about 600 employees total in that racing operation. Almost 150 in the engine /D&P shop that does that kind of work, and then car shops, paint shops, chassis shops, R&D shops, you know, road crews, truck drivers, the whole shebang. It's a big operation. This motor here has been detuned so that we can start it on pump gas. We've got about a 9-to-1 piston in this thing, and we've taken quite a bit of lift off the camshaft, so it'll start up and run here. Otherwise, it's pretty close to what you would see in a NASCAR Cup engine if you were to go to the race this weekend. It's got the Holley throttle body on it. It's electronic now. Individual coil pack for each plug and an ECM to control the engine. Crank sensor, cam sensor, throttle position sensor. Quite a bit different. Now, one big difference between this and the Cup engine, they are dry sump. We've made these into wet sump. You know, works better in the contest. So you'll see Scott here in a minute putting the oil pump on this engine. So this whole front cover oil pump assembly was custom built for these engines so we could use them in the contest. Meanwhile, if you just walked up, we're doing this for the Engine Rebuilders Council, an industry association to promote engine rebuilding rather than throwing vehicles away. I want to thank our neighbors again for being tolerant all week. Our friends over here at Eggy. They're just around the corner, so they get the blast from the exhaust system every time we start it up. And they're customers of ours and good friends of ours. Matter of fact, we always laugh when we discontinue it at Molly Cleavite, and you go to Eggy to get that stuff, you know. So they've been good friends. Our friends at DuPont over here have been good neighbors as well, and our friends over here at Ramey, and our friends over here at Wabco as well. So I need to thank all of them for being tolerant this week. The car wash people over here also. Meanwhile, I'm talking their work, and that's kind of how it goes around here. Crankshaft's in. You can see Scott getting ready to put the oil pump on. Scott Fox is putting the rear main seal on back there, and then he's going to have to get the flywheel on next. So we just keep ordering along here. How about questions from the audience? Anybody out here got questions for me or these guys? I know many of you were here early when they tore it apart, but then asking questions and visiting. Give you a little more background. This engine complete would be about $100,000 if you had to buy one. The Hendrick shop builds about 630 or 40 this year. So a lot of engines go through that shop. They supply, of course, the 4 cars, their 4 Cup cars. And then like most of the big engine builders, which is about all that's left in NASCAR, they do lease engines. So if you're familiar with Tony Stewart, Stewart-Haas Racing, his engines come from the Hendrick shop. If you're familiar with JR Motorsports, that'd be Dale Jr. and Daniel Patrick, their engines come from the Hendrick engine shop. So there are a couple more teams as well that lease engines there. The way that works, if you're not familiar with NASCAR, is when you lease the engine, you don't touch it. Now at the track, there will be a technician that will be responsible for the lease engine. Now he may be covering 2 or 3 vehicles, just depends on whether it's nationwide or Cup, you know. But there'll be somebody there, a representative from the manufacturer of the engine, and he'll take care of everything at the track. So the team doesn't mess with the engine at all. You know, they've got a guy there. So there are guys that travel for Hendrick, and there's guys that travel for Doug Yates, and there are guys that travel for Richard Childress, and that's all they do at the track is take care of these engines. We're down now, by the way, in NASCAR to a very few engine builders. We have PRD at Costa Mesa building all the Toyota Cup engines. Of course, those are all leased engines. They don't own any teams. We have Roush Yates Racing Engines in Mooresville doing all the Fords for everybody. We have Richard Childress Racing in Welton, North Carolina, and we have Hendrick Motorsports in Concord doing Chevrolets. And that's it. Chrysler's out at the end of the year, so that shop's going to close down. And there won't be any more Chrysler engines built. They're going to switch to Fords, that team over there. And hence people switch to Fords next year. So it's really a pretty small thing to encourage. Meanwhile, I'm talking, they've got almost all the Molly Motorsports pistons and Gorilla rods installed. They're running Clevite bearings. And I might mention to you that NASCAR started in 1948. There's never been a race won that didn't have Clevite bearings in the vehicle. So all the way from 1948 to last weekend in Martinsville, there have always been Clevite, now Molly Clevite bearings in the vehicle. So that's a long time of winning a lot of races. What you say now, our bearings? Yeah. Yeah, well, the thing is, the Clevite 77 bearing, which is the famous racing bearing, we invented that thing back in 1977. That's where the 77 came from. And it's still, after all these years, still the best racing material out there. So there hasn't been a whole lot of advancement in engine bearings in terms of racing. Now in the car world, what's going on there now is the bearings are all bimetal aluminum. They're steel back and a silicon aluminum layer touching the crankshaft. Now we're starting to see more and more polymer coated bearings at the OE level. Someday we may see a steel back and just a polymer coating, nothing else. But at racing level, it's still Clevite 77, like it's been since 1948. Meanwhile, we're here again for the Engine Rebuilders Council. It's a group, industry, non-profit group of companies like Molly and Jasper, Federal Mogul, and Melling, and help me out, Courtney. You can rattle them all off. I should just have you name them all.
Iggy, Elgin, Melling, now you're putting on the spot.
Put her on the spot. All companies that supply this industry, and of course we have a vested interest in the industry surviving as well, because without it we don't have anywhere to sell parts. And, we think this is a free country. America is a free country. A person should have a right to choose. If they choose to run a remanufactured engine, then we ought to have access to that marketplace. And we've lobbied hard to get all the specifications from manufacturers so they don't lock us out of this remanufactured business. So that's kind of what we do on the industry side of things. As I said, we talk, they work. Now, I can tell you, I've been doing this for years and years. If they roll this thing over at about 10 minutes, they're doing pretty good. So I'm going to walk over here and check my timer. See where we're at. 8:50. Holy cow. These guys are like racehorses. They see the end of the race. The barn is in sight. There'll be no slowing them down today. So they're going to go here and put this thing together and go back to their rooms and take naps. So we're really cooking here. Scott's struggling with that strut rod. These things are a little touchy because you've got to kind of wiggle the engine back and forth, which is hard to do to get the thing lined up. There it goes. Scott Esther's putting the lifters in. This particular engine design, you got to put the lifters in before you put the cylinder heads on. There's not enough room to get them in otherwise. So they get the lifters in now. Scott's lining the piston up. Timing marks lined up, so when they get ready to start, the thing will run. We'll see him in a minute here put the cam position sensor in. It's got a little timing mark on it as well that needs to be lined up so that it'll start. So he's getting that in. Scott's getting the rest of the lifters in, and we're really cooking along here. Again, if you walked up late, this is an R07 Chevrolet Nascar engine. I got the stopwatch right here. We're at 10 minutes and 2 seconds. R07 Chevrolet engine, Hendrick Motorsports, a detuned version of what's going to run out at the racetrack every weekend of the year. Flea-bite bearings, Molly Motorsports pistons. Our good friends at Cometic, I think those are Cometic gaskets. So they're some of the companies I mentioned are over at SEMA, the other show. But I've got a little question for you fans that are around here. What do you suppose, of all the parts of this engine, what do you suppose is the most prone to failure in a race? What part of this engine? Anybody want to take a guess?
Valve spring.
Anybody else? Well, Daniel got it. What did you say, Daniel?
Valve spring.
Yes, the valve springs, believe it or not, those little coil springs, they're the most worrisome part of the engine. They run spray oilers on them to spray them to try to keep them cool, you know, so they don't get too hot. They buy huge lots, thousands of springs at a time from their spring supplier, and they hate it when they run out and have to buy another lot because then it's all up in the air again. It's the metallurgy right, it's the heat treat right, all that stuff. If you ask the guys, it's about the scariest part of the engine. You know, it's not very sophisticated, not very high tech, but of course, if it fails, you have big trouble. It's a worrisome part of the engine. They also, by the way, spray oil up on the bottoms of the pistons in these engines during the race. They get hot. 358 cubes, we're making about 800, maybe 75 horsepower or so they get pretty hot. Also, what's happened here this year is two things. Of course, on those restrictor plate races, they bump draft, you know, so you see them doing that. They've also learned that if they tape over the air intake on the front of the car late in the race, take that thing down, the aerodynamics are better, so the car is faster. So what happens now in the last 25, 30 laps is the car gets hotter and hotter and hotter. We're seeing oil temperatures at 300 degrees or higher. So really hard on the components in the engine. Of course, crew chiefs, they're all about winning races, you know. They don't worry too much about the engine and what's happening to it. So it's just a fact of life out here. These engines are used up in about 700 miles. You know, it's a 500-mile race and then hot laps, qualifying, all the other stuff. So about 700 miles are used up. They get rebuilt after every cup race. Scott answered a question this morning from somebody, about $45,000 to rebuild one. So it's fairly expensive just to rebuild it. About $100,000 if you start from scratch. About $45,000 to rebuild it. And everything, I can tell you this as well, everything on these engines, crankshafts, connecting rods, everything has got a calculated life cycle. So many thousands, hundreds, thousands, or millions of cycles. And they figure all that out. And when the part has seen that many cycles, say a crankshaft, for instance, it's gone. You know, it's cycled out. It doesn't make any difference if it's in perfect condition or looks perfect. When it hits the cycle limit, it's moved out. Often that stuff is sold to a smaller team, you know, or pushed downstream in motorsports. But everything has a cycle limit on it here. When it hits that cycle, it's gone. There's no reusing. Also, I will tell you, as these guys slave away here putting this record together, that in Hendrick, builders don't build for a particular driver. So Scott doesn't build for Dale Jr. and the other Scott for Jeff or whatever. These guys build cup engines. They finish them, they go over to the dyno, they get run, there's paperwork with them, and their boss, a guy named Jeff Andrews, then sits down, looks at all that, and he decides who's going to get what engine. It's his decision. So these guys just build cup engines. The old days, a lot of the shops, they had an engine builder who built, you know, just for one driver. You know, Dale Earnhardt had his own engine builder for years. And all he did was build Dale's engines. Well, most shops today, that doesn't happen anymore. It's production operations, you know, hundreds of engines a year going through. And then it's kind of, well, this one goes here, that one goes there. Meanwhile, I talk, you work. We're here again for the Engine Rebuilders Council, a nonprofit industry association to promote engine repowering, vehicle repowering, rather than throwing it away. We like to think of it as we were cool, we were recycling before recycling was even possible. You know, a long time ago we've been rebuilding engines. We're back in the remanufacturing area of Apex, which is pretty cool as well. Surrounded by friends and customers. Our friends over at Aggie, one more time, guys, we really appreciate everything this week. Appreciate your support in this organization. Again, when we discontinue the Clevite, these are the guys you go see, you know, when you got a Nash and you got all this stuff that you can't find parts for anymore. Aggie's always the first stop. So. Meanwhile, rockers are going on. Now I want you to notice, see how he does this speed handle? Don't try this at home. It won't work on your speed wrench. These are highly skilled professionals here. If you go and try this at home, it'll go one turn and quit. They have worked for years to get this wiggle down. Even after being out till 4 a.m. this morning and consuming mass quantities of alcohol, they can still make that wrench wiggle. It's almost second nature to it. Matter of fact, his wife has him stir the eggs and stuff at home, you know, because he's got that wiggle down so good. Meanwhile, the sweat's pouring off Sylvester, but I know this guy's the most competitive guy in the shop down there. It's hard to slow him down, so I know he wants me to tell him where they're at time-wise. 16:08. Well, you guys are really cooking along here. The record was this morning 24. No, I guess it's 23:56 or something like that. So these guys are in pretty good shape, but they still got plenty of time here to make mistakes. Now's when it gets tiring. You know, you got all this stuff you're doing. You're out late. Trying to think, what am I going to do when I get done here? You know, I got to go home and pack, all this stuff. So we'll see if they can maintain the pace. Meanwhile, they throw parts everywhere. We've got all kinds of parts on the floor here. They're cool for me. The main thing is we don't want a lot of leftover stuff on the benches. And it looks like they're in pretty good shape. Anybody got questions out there? Well, let me tell you, since this is the last one, we appreciate you coming over here. This is the end of the show today. And a lot of people have already left, so we appreciate the fact you all came over and hang out this afternoon with us. It's been a really great show, Courtney and Larry. I hope we do this again next year. It's just a lot of fun. Yep. And I think it's good for our industry, good for people to see this. Not often if you really get a chance to see an engine put together and run in 25 minutes, you know, right before your eyes. So it's really a pretty cool deal. One more time, I'm Bill from Ollie Clevite. I've been doing this 32 years, so been around a little bit. Scott Fox on the left, Scott Vester on the right, both engine assemblers and builders for Hendrick Motorsports. They started back in 1999. They had a guy there named Randy Dorton. Really brilliant guy that ran that shop, but still did airplane crash. But Randy, there was a big expansion of Hendrick back in the 99, and Randy hired a bunch of guys, and these were two of the guys that he hired and brought into the shop. Scott was a line mechanic at a car dealership, and this guy here was doing small engine work somewhere. Where were you at, Scott? KT Engines, okay? So they slid into the Hendrick place there in 99. They've been there ever since. And I know since I've been coming down there, it's grown and changed, buildings are added. And now I heard Mr. Hendrick talking the other day about cutting a new road down through there. And it's just amazing. If you ever get to the track at Charlotte, they're only a mile from the track.
I was there last week.
Good. Did you go see their place?
Engine shop is closed.
Was it? Okay.
Restricted.
Yeah. It is kind of cool though. You can go to the museum, you can go out and watch the guys practice tire changing, you know, out back. That's open. Did you see the little workout area? It looks like a little miniature football field and running track. They're pretty serious about that stuff.
Yes, they are.
Yep. Get up to the car shops on the hill?
Yep.
Good. Good deal. It's a beautiful place, isn't it?
Beautiful.
Yep.
Beautiful museum.
Yes, it is. I'll tell you another great one if you have time to go down. Is Richard Childress' museum there. Welcome. It was the old original race car shop, and he turned it into a museum, and it's really neat too. A lot of history there. Meanwhile, I thought they were. It's about time for me to turn the master switch on, which means they're getting close, although there's a few leftover parts on this table I'm concerned about. I'm going to get them out here so Scott doesn't get them. Actually, one of the critical parts, we've got to turn the switch back off. Judge never lets the engine start until the critical stuff is on. We don't anybody hurt, so we'll have to turn it back off. Meanwhile, we've got that Holley EFI on there. We found out a couple of weeks ago I actually run backwards. You can put that thing on there backwards and the engine will still start and run. one of our technicians in haste and, doing the contest, got on there backwards. It was a little weird because the throttle, of course, is on the other side, but no harm done. Scott's putting a little carbon fiber cover on the front there. Now, this is really tricky. It keeps them from getting their hands in that reluctor wheel. And it was interesting. I asked him the other day when I was down in Hendrick, I said, this must be a racing thing. You must run that on all the Cup cars, huh? And Kevin says, no, there's just 3 of them in the world. We have 3 of these engines. We made 3 of them. One of our guys did a CAD model and created that in CAD. And we created a pattern, and we took it over to our carbon fiber shop, and they made 3 shields for us, just like that. So not much they can't do at Hendrick Motorsports. It's a pretty amazing place. Now let me turn the master switch on. They're getting closer. So we'll turn the switch on. I'll get back. I hope these oil lines are on. In the old days, those essentially blow off and spray everybody on this side of the room with oil. So we're hoping they're on. I'll get back here just in case. So here we go. How long do you think it took him? Anyone want to guess?
22 minutes.
20? Take a guess.
You put that on the
What do you guess off?
seal off, they don't tear the seal off before we knock it off. There's one
21,
for there,
24.
Wow. Look, huh? 21 minutes, 24 seconds. So, yeah, they want to go home. They want to go to bed. Of course, they want to go. But, folks, these guys will be